Hey there, this is Joseph from NizhoniPhoto.com, and in today's lesson we're going to be talking about how to create some really advanced layer masks very easily in Photoshop. So in order to really understand this video and follow along easily, you really need to understand layer masks, and basically if you understand that white reveals and black conceals, you're going to be good to go. So with that in mind, let's delve right into it. So with this photo, there are a couple things that I want to do. One thing I want to do is I want to darken the sky down a little bit. I want to darken it down so that I bring out this sunset a little bit more. Another thing I want to do is I want to brighten up the foreground a little bit more. So one way to do this is we could create an adjustment and have a layer mask over that area. Well, to create an adjustment, we need to have a selection. Now, as we know in Photoshop, there are a couple different ways to do selections. One thing we can do is we could use our lasso tool or even the quick save tool, and we could drag over this area and boom, we have a selection. The problem with this is that if we have elements in our photo, such as this power line here, these complicated little elements will make it hard for our smart brush or the quick selection tool to actually create those tight selections. So if we create an adjustment with a poor selection, we're not really going to get some good looking results. So there is a better way to create selections, or really what we're doing is creating layer masks here. And I'm going to show you how we do that. So here's what we do. Let's start with the sky. We want to darken this down a little bit. First thing we're going to do is actually create our adjustment. Okay, so we're going to go into curves. We're going to select this little hand icon so that way we can drag. I have this eyedropper and we can drag it over the area that we want to darken. We'll click here and we're going to deepen the sky down a little bit. Drag it down. All right, I might drag down the clouds just a little bit more. And let's look at the before and the after by clicking this icon. And there we go. Looks pretty good. Now, again, the problem is that the sky looks great, but the foreground kind of looks like garbage. It's too black, too dark. So we need to mask this out. Okay, here's how we can create an easy mask. Once you create the selection, go up into Image, click on Apply Image, and what Photoshop does is, just go ahead and click OK, keep the settings as they are. What Photoshop does is it creates a mask for you, a very complicated mask. If we hold Option and click on the mask, whoops, you can see here's our mask. It's this nice, complicated mask here. Now we know that white reveals and black conceals. So the black areas are being completely concealed, so we're not seeing any of our adjustment, and the white areas are being completely revealed. But since black conceals and white reveals, we need to understand that there is a gradient between white and black. And halfway between white and black would be gray. So that means that these gray areas of the image would have essentially 50% of the adjustment showing through. And then when you go from gray to white, there's even less of an adjustment, and from white to black, there's more of an adjustment showing through from gray to white, and there's less of an adjustment from gray to black. So if we actually look at this mask, we can make this mask actually disappear by holding Shift and clicking on it, and we can see this was our original adjustment. But with the mask, it does a little bit better. It's masking out a lot of the foreground here, but it's still also not showing through completely in the sky. So let's hold Option and click on our mask to see it again. So we want a starker difference between our sky and foreground. We want the sky to show through completely, and we don't want the foreground to show through at all, meaning that we don't want to see the adjustment in the foreground at all, just the sky. So to do that, we need to get rid of all these grays. We need to just have whites in the sky and blacks in the foreground. Now to do that, we want to have our mask selected. and we will hold Command, that's Control on a PC, and tap the M key to bring up our Curves panel. Now with the Curves panel open, just make sure that you have this hand tool selected so you can drag over a gray area of your image. We're going to use this area right here, maybe this, and we are going to click on that area and drag it up in our tone curve. And as we can see, we've brightened our sky so much that it's almost pure white, except in these spots, but we'll deal with these in a second. Excuse me. Now we want to do the same thing with our foreground. We will click on an area of our foreground and drag it all the way down to create a really deep black foreground. Click on OK because we're done. Now again, for the most part, we've done a good job, but there's still some problem areas where our mask is going to be concealed in our sky and be revealed in our foreground. So we need to get rid of these. We need to paint in white in these gray areas and black in these black areas. Okay. Now again, there's multiple ways to do the same thing in Photoshop. So one way we can paint out these areas is to use selections. For this case, we will use our marquee tool, and we'll go ahead and drag over this area. Okay, now we can hold Command and delete, and what it's going to do is that fills in our selection with the background layer on this color panel here. If we hold Option and delete, it fills it in with this front color on our little color panel here, okay? If we were to invert this, we can fill our selection in now by holding Option and delete, because again, we're filling in our selection with this front color here, okay? Hold Command and D to deselect our selection. Now another way to get rid of these areas is you can paint them out. Simply go to your brush and paint out with white, and there you have it. An even better way to do it is to use your brush and select the overlay option. Now what overlay does is it's a brush that paints out gray, but it leaves whites and blacks alone. So if we have our white brush selected in overlay, we can paint over the white all we want and it won't do anything. But when we drag it over these grays, boom, they disappear like magic. Okay? If we were to do this in our black area, it's really accentuating those whites. So to get rid of these whites in the black area, we just want to invert this brush, select it to black, and paint these away. Oops. Just like that. Okay. Now I can see here, if we zoom in, we still have these little pesky gray areas here. So again, just make sure that we are in our brush overlay tool, select white, and there they go. Now we've got these tight little selections. Whoop, go back to black in order to paint this in a little more. Okay. Let me go ahead and back up just a little bit here. All the way back. Okay, that looks a lot better. So that's how we use the overlay brush. Just make sure that when you're using your overlay brush that you always put it back to normal. Because if you're in overlay and you're trying to do layer masking, like brushing your layers out, the brush isn't going to work. So if you ever find that your brush isn't working and you do use overlay, just make sure that you're not still selected into overlay. Now that we have this tight little mask, we can go back to our image and we can see that this selection is just being applied to the sky. Now, if we were to hold down the Command key and click on this mask here, we see that it will select this mask as an adjustment, as a selection, right? We can invert the selection by holding Shift, Command I, and now our selection goes from being on the sky into our foreground. Now that we have our foreground selection created, we can just create an adjustment. Click on the curves, go ahead and click on this hand tool, oops, and brighten it up. You see, and now this is just being applied to our selected area. Okay, so let's just brighten that up just a little bit, maybe like that. Okay. And now you can see here what it's done is based on our selection, it has applied this adjustment right to the selection. Let's go ahead and delete that because I want to show you another way to do that. Okay. Go ahead and so we have our adjustment made. We've deleted the layer mask, so this adjustment is being applied to our whole image. If we click this eyeball, you can see here's our adjustment just to the sky, and then we have this bright adjustment being applied everywhere. Now that we have created this mask here, we can copy the mask into our adjustment simply by holding the Option key, Alt on a PC, clicking and dragging our mask into that selection, and it is copied onto this adjustment. The problem is that we see that, again, we are revealing this brightness in the sky, but concealing it in the foreground. We want that to be reversed. We want this adjustment to be applied to the foreground and masked out from the sky. So all we need to do is click on this mask and invert it by holding Command and tapping I. And there you go. If you hold this eyeball key down, this little icon, you can see it's just being applied really nicely to our foreground. Now, the problem I'm seeing from here is that the road here looks great. It's nice and bright. I like it. But the mountains look like garbage. There's way too much brightness in the mountains, and we've lost all the nice little juicy contrast. So we want to go ahead and mask that out. All we have to do is click on our mask, and let's go ahead and hold Option and click on this mask. So again, we were working with this area here. You know, this is about where our mountains are. So since we are revealing it with white, we really want to mask this out by using more of a gray so that we get more of a feathered effect. Let's go ahead and go back to our image. We'll go to our brush, and now we'll set the opacity down to somewhere around, like, I don't know, 25%. Make sure that we are brushing with black. And all we have to do is brush over this mountain, and it looks a lot better. Really easy. So you can refine your masks really easily by just clicking on the mask, and you can paint over them at any time in order to refine them. You can see, there we go. We have our hard selection, our hard concealment of our selection, and then we have this feathered effect right here that we've applied with our brush. So there you have it. Here is the before, and here's what we've done. We've applied our selection to our sky, and then we've made this feathered adjustment to our foreground. And there you have it. That's all there is to it. That's a really easy way to create some really awesome layer masks in Photoshop. Hopefully this was helpful. If it was, check out my website, www.nizhoniphoto.com. Like me on Facebook, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys later. Peace.